Jenny never imagined that love would place her in the middle of one of the most emotional battles of her life. When she first connected with Sumit online, it felt like a simple friendship that slowly turned into something deeper. Their conversations were easy, their laughter felt natural, and before long they realized that they had fallen in love. At first, the distance between them seemed like the biggest challenge. Jenny was living in the United States, while Sumit was in India. Different time zones, different lifestyles, and completely different cultures separated them. But somehow their connection kept growing stronger. For Jenny, Sumit brought excitement and happiness into her life at a time when she never expected to fall in love again. She had already lived many years, experienced life's ups and downs, and thought that chapter of romance might already be behind her. Yet Sumit changed everything. Their love story began with hope, but it quickly became complicated once reality entered the picture. Jenny eventually decided to take a huge step. She left the comfort of her home and traveled all the way to India to be with Sumit. For many people, that decision would already be a massive life change. Moving across the world means leaving behind family, friends, and everything familiar. But Jenny believed that love was worth the risk. What she did not fully understand at the beginning was how powerful tradition and family expectations can be in India. In many parts of Indian culture, family plays a central role in decisions about relationships and marriage. Parents often expect to have a strong voice in choosing a suitable partner for their children. These expectations are rooted in generations of tradition and values that families take very seriously. When Sumit's family learned about Jenny, they were shocked. She was not only from a different country, but she was also significantly older than Sumit. To them, this relationship did not fit the image they had imagined for their son's future. The tension began almost immediately. Jenny suddenly found herself in a situation where she felt like she was constantly being judged. Every interaction with Sumit's family carried emotional weight. She wanted to be respectful. She wanted to show that she cared about their culture, but she also wanted to be accepted for who she was. That balance proved extremely difficult. At times, Jenny felt like an outsider looking in, unsure of how to fully belong in this new world around her. Meanwhile, Sumit was caught in the middle of an incredibly painful conflict. On one side was the woman he loved deeply. On the other side was his family, the people who had raised him and whose approval meant so much to him. The pressure on him grew stronger with every passing day. He understood his parents' concerns and their attachment to tradition. At the same time, he could see how much Jenny had sacrificed just to be with him. Jenny had given up the life she knew. She had moved to a new country, faced cultural differences, and tried to adapt to customs that were unfamiliar to her. That kind of sacrifice is not easy for anyone. Some days felt hopeful, while other days were filled with emotional tension. There were moments when Jenny questioned whether she would ever truly be accepted by Sumit's family. She could sense the disapproval in certain conversations and the hesitation in certain reactions. It hurt her deeply because all she wanted was to build a peaceful life with the man she loved. Cultural differences also created unexpected misunderstandings. Certain traditions that were normal for Sumit's family felt confusing to Jenny. Things like family hierarchy, expectations about marriage roles, and respect for elders carried deep meaning in their culture. Jenny tried to learn and understand these traditions, but sometimes the emotional weight behind them was hard for her to fully grasp. The more she tried to adapt, the more she realized how complex the situation truly was. Love may connect two people, but when two completely different cultures meet, challenges naturally appear. Viewers who followed their journey could clearly see the emotional toll this situation was taking on both Jenny and Sumit. There were moments when Jenny looked exhausted from constantly trying to prove that her love was genuine. She wanted Sumit's family to see her heart, to understand that she was not trying to disrespect their traditions. She simply wanted a chance to be accepted as part of their family. Sumit also struggled with the impossible task of making everyone happy. He tried to reassure Jenny that their love was strong enough to survive these obstacles. At the same time, he tried to calm the concerns of his parents and convince them to give their relationship a chance. But balancing these two worlds felt like walking on a tightrope. One wrong step could cause everything to fall apart. The emotional stress created moments of doubt for both of them. Jenny sometimes wondered if the sacrifices she made would ever truly be enough. Sumit sometimes wondered if he would ever find a way to bring peace between the two most important parts of his life. What makes their story so powerful is that neither of them wanted to hurt anyone. Jenny respected Sumit's family and their traditions, even when she did not fully understand them. Sumit loved his parents and valued the cultural values they had taught him growing up. Yet their love placed them directly in the middle of a cultural conflict that seemed impossible to resolve. For Jenny, the hardest moments came when she felt alone. Being in a new country without the familiar support of friends and family can feel incredibly isolating. Small problems can suddenly feel much bigger when there is no one around who truly understands your perspective. In those moments, Jenny had to rely on her own strength and on the belief that love would guide them through the struggle. The journey was far from easy. Every step forward seemed to bring another challenge. But Jenny continued to fight for her relationship because she believed that what she and Sumit shared was real. She believed that love should not be limited by age, nationality, or tradition. Yet the question still lingered in the background of their story. Could love truly overcome the weight of tradition, or would the pressure eventually become too heavy for their relationship to survive? The question still lingered in the background of their story. Could love truly overcome the weight of tradition, or would the pressure eventually become too heavy for their relationship to survive? That question followed Jenny every single day as she tried to adjust to a life that felt so different from the one she had always known. Some mornings she woke up hopeful, believing that things would eventually get better. Other days the reality of her situation felt overwhelming. Living in a new country with unfamiliar customs can make even the smallest challenges feel enormous. Jenny often found herself thinking about the life she had left behind in America. She remembered the comfort of familiar streets, the ease of speaking the same language as everyone around her, and the simple feeling of belonging. In India, everything was different. The food, the language, the family expectations, and the traditions all formed a world she was still trying to understand. Yet despite those struggles, one thing remained clear in Jenny's heart. She loved Sumit deeply, and that love was the reason she continued to fight through the difficulties. Sumit could see the emotional toll that the situation was taking on her. There were moments when he felt guilty knowing that Jenny had sacrificed so much to be with him. He understood that leaving one's home country is not a small decision. It means letting go of comfort and stepping into uncertainty. Sumit often tried to reassure Jenny that their love was worth it, that eventually things would become easier. But deep down, he also knew that convincing his family to fully accept Jenny would not be simple. His parents had grown up with strong beliefs about marriage and tradition. In their eyes, certain rules were not meant to be broken. A son marrying someone from another country, especially someone much older, felt impossible for them to accept. Their disappointment and anger created emotional tension that never fully disappeared. Family conversations often became uncomfortable. Words that were meant to express concern sometimes sounded like rejection. Jenny could feel the distance between herself and Sumit's parents, and that feeling of being unwelcome was painful. She tried to remain respectful, reminding herself that their reactions came from cultural values that had been passed down for generations. But respect did not erase the sadness she felt when she realized how difficult it was for them to see her as part of their family. Sumit found himself in the middle of this emotional storm again and again. On one side was the woman he loved and wanted to build a life with. On the other side were the parents who had raised him and whose approval he had always valued. Trying to satisfy both sides felt like an impossible mission. At times he tried to avoid confrontation, hoping that time would slowly soften his parents' opinions. Other times he tried to defend Jenny and explain that their relationship was genuine. But each attempt seemed to create new tension rather than resolve the old conflicts. For Jenny, patience became one of the hardest lessons to learn. She realized that cultural acceptance does not happen overnight. Traditions are powerful because they are tied to identity and family history. Expecting immediate change would only lead to disappointment. Instead, Jenny focused on small moments of progress. A calmer conversation, a slightly warmer reaction, or even a moment of silence instead of criticism sometimes felt like victories. Yet the emotional weight of the situation never fully disappeared. Every relationship needs a sense of stability to grow stronger. For Jenny and Sumit, that stability often felt fragile because of the constant pressure from outside forces. Even happy moments between them were sometimes overshadowed by the uncertainty of the future. Jenny occasionally asked herself difficult questions. Would Sumit's family ever truly accept her? Would they always see her as the outsider who disrupted their expectations? And if that acceptance never came, could she continue living in a place where she felt like she didn't fully belong? These thoughts did not mean that Jenny regretted her decision. She still believed in the love she shared with Sumit. But believing in love does not erase the reality of emotional struggles. It simply means choosing to keep going despite them. Sumit also carried his own fears about the future. He worried that the constant conflict between love and tradition might eventually break the relationship he cared about so deeply. At times he wondered if he had asked too much of Jenny by bringing her into such a complicated situation. Yet every time he looked at her, he was reminded of how strong her commitment truly was. Jenny had crossed oceans and faced cultural challenges because she believed in their love. That kind of devotion is rare and powerful. Their journey became more than just a relationship story. It became a story about sacrifice, cultural differences, and the difficult question of how far someone should go for love. In many ways, Jenny represented the courage to follow the heart even when the path becomes incredibly difficult. She refused to let fear or rejection completely destroy the hope she carried. Sumit represented the struggle of someone who loves deeply but feels trapped between two worlds that refuse to understand each other. Together they continued walking forward, unsure of exactly what the future would bring but determined not to give up easily. Their story reminds us that love is rarely simple when it crosses cultural boundaries. It requires patience, understanding, and sometimes painful compromises. Whether Jenny and Sumit's love would ultimately overcome the weight of tradition remained uncertain, but one thing was undeniable. Their journey showed how powerful the human heart can be when it refuses to stop believing. Their journey showed how powerful the human heart can be when it refuses to stop believing. But even with that belief, Jenny knew that the road ahead was still full of uncertainty. Love had brought her across the world, but love alone could not erase the cultural walls that stood between her and Sumit's family. Some days felt peaceful, almost normal. Jenny and Sumit would laugh together, cook meals, and talk about the future they wanted to build. In those moments, it felt like everything they had fought for was finally worth it. Yet the calm moments never lasted forever. Reality always found a way to return. The truth was that tradition was deeply rooted in Sumit's family, and changing those beliefs would take time, patience, and perhaps more sacrifice than Jenny had ever imagined. Still, Jenny refused to give up easily. She reminded herself why she had come to India in the first place. It was not just for an adventure or a temporary romance. She came because she believed that the bond she shared with Sumit was real. She believed that true love should not be limited by age, nationality, or cultural differences. Sumit also understood that this situation required courage from both of them. For him, standing beside Jenny meant challenging expectations that had been part of his life since childhood. It meant risking the approval of people whose opinions had always mattered to him. That decision was not easy. In many cultures, family approval carries enormous weight. Children are often raised to respect and follow their parents' wishes, especially when it comes to marriage. Choosing a different path can create emotional conflict that lasts for years. Sumit felt that conflict every day. He loved his parents deeply and respected the traditions they believed in. But he also knew that Jenny had become the most important person in his life. Ignoring that truth would mean losing the woman who had already sacrificed so much for their relationship. Meanwhile, Jenny continued trying to adapt to life in India. She learned more about the culture, the customs, and the everyday routines that shaped Sumit's world. Slowly, she became more comfortable navigating the differences between her past life and her new one. But adapting to a culture and being accepted by a family are two very different things. Jenny still felt the emotional distance whenever she thought about Sumit's parents. Their disapproval had left deep marks on her heart. Even when they were not physically present, the tension they created remained part of Jenny and Sumit's relationship. It was like an invisible pressure that followed them wherever they went. Yet despite everything, Jenny still held on to hope. She believed that people's hearts can change over time. She believed that patience and sincerity might eventually soften the resistance she faced. Perhaps one day Sumit's family would see that her love for their son was genuine. Perhaps one day they would understand that she was not trying to take him away from them, but simply trying to build a life together with him. Until that day arrived, Jenny knew that strength would be her greatest ally. Love had already taken her farther than she ever imagined. Now it would require resilience, patience, and emotional courage to continue the journey. For viewers watching their story unfold, the question remained the same. Could Jenny and Sumit truly overcome the powerful traditions standing in their way, or would the pressure of family expectations eventually break the bond they fought so hard to protect? Their story was still being written, and the ending had yet to be decided. Their story was still being written, and the ending had yet to be decided. Jenny understood that every new day in India would bring another test of patience and strength. She had already come so far, but the emotional journey was far from over. Some evenings, when the day finally grew quiet, Jenny would sit and reflect on everything that had happened since she first met Sumit. It felt almost unbelievable how a simple online conversation had turned into a life-changing adventure. She remembered the excitement of those early days when their relationship was still new and full of dreams. Back then, the challenges ahead were hard to imagine. Everything seemed possible because love made the future look bright and hopeful. But now Jenny had seen the complicated side of that dream. She had faced rejection, cultural confusion, and moments when the future felt uncertain. Even so, she refused to believe that the story had to end in disappointment. Jenny knew that real relationships are rarely perfect. They are built through struggle, compromise, and perseverance. And in many ways, the hardship she faced had only shown how serious her feelings truly were. Anyone can love when life is easy, but it takes real commitment to keep loving when the road becomes difficult. Sumit also spent a lot of time thinking about what the future might hold. He often wondered if time would eventually heal the conflict between his relationship and his family's expectations. In his heart, he hoped that one day his parents would look beyond tradition and see the happiness that Jenny brought into his life. He hoped they would understand that love does not always follow the rules people expect it to follow. Culture and tradition are powerful forces, but the human heart can be just as powerful. For Sumit, that belief gave him the courage to continue standing beside Jenny even when things became uncomfortable or tense. Of course, there were still moments when doubt appeared. Both Jenny and Sumit were human, and no one can carry emotional pressure forever without feeling its weight. Sometimes they worried that the stress from family conflict could slowly damage the happiness they had built together. But whenever those doubts appeared, they reminded each other why they had chosen this path. Their love had survived distance, cultural differences, and enormous criticism. That kind of bond does not disappear easily. It grows stronger through the very struggles that try to break it. As time moved forward, Jenny continued trying to show patience and respect toward the traditions around her. She knew that understanding another culture requires humility and an open mind. Even when she felt hurt, she tried to remember that Sumit's parents were reacting from a place of belief and tradition rather than personal cruelty. That understanding did not erase the pain, but it helped Jenny keep her perspective. Meanwhile, Sumit kept searching for ways to bridge the gap between the two sides of his life. He hoped that one day there would be a moment of understanding, a conversation that finally opened the door to acceptance. Whether that moment would come soon or years later, no one could say. What remained clear was that Jenny and Sumit had already shown incredible determination. Their story was not just about romance. It was about two people learning how to navigate the powerful forces of family, culture, and tradition while trying to protect the love they shared. And in the end, that journey carried a message that many people around the world could relate to. Love often asks difficult questions. It forces people to confront expectations, traditions, and fears they never expected to face. But it also reveals strength, courage, and the willingness to fight for what truly matters. For Jenny, the battle with tradition was never simply about winning or losing. It was about proving that her love for Sumit was real enough to endure even the hardest challenges. Whether their story would end in complete acceptance or continued struggle remained uncertain. But one thing was undeniable. Jenny's emotional battle with tradition had become a powerful reminder that love, when it is genuine, will always try to find a way forward. Jenny's emotional battle with tradition had become a powerful reminder that love, when it is genuine, will always try to find a way forward. Even after everything she had faced, Jenny still believed that the future held possibilities. She knew that relationships built across cultures require time, patience, and an incredible amount of understanding. Nothing about her journey had been easy, but she also knew that the most meaningful stories in life are rarely simple. Every day in India continued to teach Jenny something new. Sometimes it was a small cultural detail, like the way families share meals or how respect is shown to elders. Other times it was a deeper lesson about patience and resilience. Living far away from the place she once called home forced her to grow stronger in ways she never expected. There were moments when she missed the familiar life she had left behind. The quiet comfort of knowing the streets around her, the friends she could easily talk to, and the language she spoke every day without effort. In India, even the simplest tasks sometimes required adjustment. But Jenny reminded herself that every challenge was part of the journey she had chosen. For Sumit, watching Jenny adapt to this new life made him admire her even more. He saw how hard she was trying to respect the culture around her while still staying true to herself. That balance was not easy, and he understood how much courage it required. At the same time, Sumit still carried the emotional weight of his family's expectations. Family bonds in his culture were incredibly strong, and disappointing his parents was something that deeply affected him. He often wondered whether there would ever be a moment when both sides of his life could finally exist in harmony. The situation sometimes felt like two powerful worlds colliding. On one side was the traditional structure of family expectations that had existed for generations. On the other side was a love story that refused to fit neatly into those expectations. For Jenny, the challenge was not just about being accepted by Sumit's parents. It was also about finding her own sense of belonging in a place that still felt unfamiliar. Building a life in another country requires emotional strength that many people never have to test. Yet Jenny continued moving forward with determination. She believed that if she showed patience, kindness, and sincerity, perhaps one day the resistance she faced would slowly begin to fade. Human hearts are capable of change, and sometimes understanding grows in the most unexpected ways. Sumit also held onto that hope. He dreamed of a future where his family could see the happiness Jenny brought into his life. A future where cultural differences would not be seen as obstacles but as part of a unique and meaningful story. Until that day arrived, both of them knew that their relationship would continue to face challenges. But challenges do not always destroy love. Sometimes they strengthen it. Jenny and Sumit's story had already proven that love can cross borders, languages, and cultures. Their journey showed that relationships are not only about romance, but also about sacrifice, growth, and the courage to stand by the person you care about. And as their story continued to unfold, one thing remained certain. Jenny had come too far to give up now. The battle with tradition had tested her in ways she never imagined, but it had also revealed just how strong her heart truly was. Whether the future would bring acceptance, peace, or new challenges was still unknown. But Jenny and Sumit had already shown the world that love is not always easy, yet it is powerful enough to inspire people to keep fighting for the life they believe in. Their journey was still moving forward, and some way ahead, the next chapter of their story was waiting to be written. On one side was the traditional structure of family expectations that had existed for generations. On the other side was a love story that refused to fit neatly into those expectations. For Jenny, the challenge was not just about being accepted by Sumit's parents. It was also about finding her own sense of belonging in a place that still felt unfamiliar. Building a life in another country requires emotional strength that many people never have to test. Yet Jenny continued moving forward with determination. She believed that if she showed patience, kindness, and sincerity, perhaps one day the resistance she faced would slowly begin to fade. Human hearts are capable of change, and sometimes understanding grows in the most unexpected ways. Sumit also held onto that hope. He dreamed of a future where his family could see the happiness Jenny brought into his life. A future where cultural differences would not be seen as obstacles but as part of a unique and meaningful story. Until that day arrived, both of them knew that their relationship would continue to face challenges. But challenges do not always destroy love. Sometimes they strengthen it. Jenny and Sumit's story had already proven that love can cross borders, languages, and cultures. Their journey showed that relationships are not only about romance, but also about sacrifice, growth, and the courage to stand by the person you care about. And as their story continued to unfold, one thing remained certain. Jenny had come too far to give up now. The battle with tradition had tested her in ways she never imagined, but it had also revealed just how strong her heart truly was. Whether the future would bring acceptance, peace, or new challenges was still unknown. But Jenny and Sumit had already shown the world that love is not always easy, yet it is powerful enough to inspire people to keep fighting